the 12 of you that are watching this video. Welcome back from the first episode where we traveled from Roseburg, Oregon all the way to Denali. This second episode takes us from our cabin stay just outside the Denali Park down to Anchorage, Alaska, and then down the Kenai Peninsula all the way to Homer, Alaska, where we're going to take a Glacier sightseeing tour on an airplane. I'm glad you're with us. But before we leave Denali area, let's start with a drone view of some of the mountains around Denali Park. Here we go. Here's another scenic highway that you really don't want to be in a rush to take. There's just too many great things to see. We're going to stop at a roadside park where there's trails for you to hike and see a different view of Mount McKinley off in the distance. We stayed near the airport in Anchorage and drove around, washed our clothes. Really didn't enjoy it a whole lot. It seemed kind of dirty in some of the places that we saw anyway. And we were anxious to get on and see other things. Anchorage's population is 291,000 people. The distance from Anchorage to Homer, Alaska is 223 miles. We definitely took our time and enjoyed so much scenery. We rented a 2-bedroom home while we were in Homer, Alaska, and we would have stayed there the full 4 days if I would have booked early enough so that we could have reserved it. I think it went for $140 a night and was really a comfortable place. We took a windy road up the side of the hill that surrounds Homer so that we could get a good look of everything. You can see the spit out there that goes out about 4 miles into that bay, and the mountains on the other side where we took our glacier viewing trip, which you'll see in a little bit. Here's what the spit looks like from the driver's seat. We went out there numerous times each day. There's some great restaurants out there and fishing and sightseeing. bit jealous of that drone. So we scheduled a trip for Becky and I to get up into the air for about an hour and see the local glaciers. The trip cost less than $300 for both of us, and we got a good view of the bay and of course the spit that we're about to fly over. There's people fishing right off the beach on one side of that spit, and then there's a little cove there where people were catching salmon with a rod and reel right off the shoreline. I saw somebody on the west side of the spit pulling a halibut, although it was rather small, and some bass. You can camp right on the beach there for free, and restrooms are close by. This is a view from across the bay where you can see the mountains that are producing some of those glaciers. This area has quite a history because it used to be occupied by the Russians, and there's a lot of mining going on in that bay area. I'll just be quiet and let you enjoy some of the view of the glacier area around Homer, Alaska. Didn't take long and we were ready to land, and our pilot, even though he had a clear runway on the pavement, had to show off his grass landing skills. It was pretty good. Here's another angle of the spit that goes out from Homer, and we're at a beach where they allow you to have pets. It doesn't get much better than a fun game of fetch with a view like this. Our time at Homer was the favorite part of our whole trip, and we hope to go back there again sometime. The town is a quaint town with some great restaurants, and the people seem laid back and friendly. They're definitely used to having a lot of visitors and are set up to accommodate those. I did go fishing while I was there on a commercial boat for 2 days. Caught 4 halibut and 4 salmon and had them shipped home. It was a fun experience, and I got to see whales out in the bay. Unfortunately, I didn't film any of that because my wife wasn't with me. We had 37 pounds of fish that were shipped home dry ice, and by the time we paid for the boat and the license and the shipping, it came out to about $20 a pound for that fish, which is probably more expensive than you'd pay for it in the store back home. We tried to take as many different roads when we had a choice on the way home so we could see other things. And this is Highway 1 between Palmer and Glen Allen. We're really glad we took this route. It was not real busy, and there were just these amazing mountains. There's a glacier up there, right, the crevice between those two mountains. And of course, there's always fetch to play. It was on this day that we saw the only moose of the whole trip. Also on this trip, we found these 3 grizzly bears off the side of the road, so we pulled over to see them and rolled the window down so we could get some clear pictures. It appeared to be a mama and her baby and maybe a yearling. The yearling was more brave, and he came up to the side of the car, and we let him get as close as we dared before we rolled the window up and headed down the road. Here he is. Day 14 took us all the way to Tok. It was 587 miles. And you can tell the sun's going down, and it's not quite dark yet, but there were the bugs that started to come out. Amazingly enough, I only got bit once by a mosquito during this entire trip, and my wife didn't get bit at all, so it was pretty successful that way. Tok is where Highway 1 meets up with the main Alaskan highway. We stayed in these quaint little cabins with a sod roof. They even put a lawnmower or 2 up there for the fun of it. It's a great place to stay. We highly recommend it. Day 15 was a 387-mile trip from Tok, Alaska to Whitehorse, Yukon. Here's the border crossing back into the Yukon. This was the Alaskan highway, which you'd already seen from the other direction on our way in. And the only eventful thing that day was a drone failure when I dropped the drone into the lake at Lake Kluan. We'll see if we can find some of that wet footage. You know what's said about pride, it comes before the fall. You got it. So I was feeling pretty good. It's day 12 and I've been flying drones almost every day. I should know what I'm doing. So we're out over the water on Lake Kluan, this beautiful lake that's 30 miles long and pretty wide. And I'm thinking, let's try some adventure shots. And in the process, I pushed down instead of up and ended up plunging into the lake for just a few inches, but enough to drench the important parts. Afterwards, our gimbal wasn't working quite right, and the GoPro was thoroughly soaked. It wasn't a waterproof version, but they were all working fine by the next day. That's one way to get humbled. After a lunch there and a nice stretch break, we headed over to Whitehorse where we spent the night. This brings us to the end of episode 2. In the next episode, we'll start day 16 with a trip to a hunting cabin in British Columbia where we saw a lot of wildlife we didn't expect to see. Thanks for joining us.